Now, this red Porsche, as you're probably all aware, is a 911 Turbo. Everybody knows a 911 Turbo, don't they? This one's a Turbo S. You know, it's one of those iconic performance cars, isn't it? Whether you know it from Bad Boys, or you know it from a supercar book, or you know it as a family friend, or whatever. Let's consider where you would have been to get to a 911 Turbo. And you probably worked your way through a fair few icons to get here, haven't you? You know, it'll be things like, you'll go Golf GTI, M3, maybe an Impreza or an Evo of some kind, perhaps a GTR before this, you know, and then you want that performance in a slightly more refined package, I guess. It's going to be a long journey. This is a 150 grand car. You're not going to have got hold of one too easily. So why would you have found yourself in a 911 Turbo, as so many people do? Big, huge reason number one is how fast this car is. I don't care what you've come from, this car is fantastically quick. So, second gear, 30 miles an hour. That's the top of second gear, quite a lot more than 30 miles an hour. And what's exciting as well is there really is some lag here. You know, unlike the Carreras with that 3-litre engine, this needs a few revs to get going. So if I just give you a quick example here, third gear, we'll just let the revs die a little. So there's 2,000 revs or so, foot to the floor, and there's not quite anything, and then the boost comes, and you just hold on and guide it along. It's just so quick. Anyway, what you've got with this Turbo S as well, as you get with a lot of Porsches actually, is just some really nicely sorted control weights as well, which inspire loads and loads of confidence, especially when it's a bit greasy like it is today. It's not an analog 911, you know, they haven't been out for a long time. You've got electric steering, you've got a dual clutch gearbox, but they are, you know, as good as you're going to find, you know, of those systems. And what they allow you to do, because you've got the confidence in those, and what you interact with is the confidence to push the car a little bit more. And I mean, obviously you're going to need a track to reach the full potential, but when it is a bit more slippery, you can always get the impression of sort of driving out of corners, benefiting from that traction and absolutely slingshotting out, and it's a really, really cool thing to be able to do. And it's this incredible dual personality, I guess, that's appealed about 911 Turbos for so long, that you can blitz anything, and I mean anything. I can't believe a car is quicker down the road than this, realistically, now. 1 second, and then take it back to refined normal 911 the next. And that is a really, I guess, endearing trait for 911 Turbos, because that's what they've always been sold on, and it does it so, so well. However, enough 911 Turbo eulogising, I'm sure you've heard it all before. We were talking about a sports car journey, and you know, where you may go from a 911 Turbo and why you might want to do that. One key part of it is a Turbo S is very popular, but that makes it slightly ubiquitous as well. If you say, I've got a 911 Turbo, I don't think many people can be too excited, you know, and you've spent a lot of money on a car, people may just dismiss it as another 911. They really shouldn't, but they probably will, won't they? In the same way that perhaps with a GTR, you may grow out of, you know, perhaps that image doesn't suit. I think red 911, spoilers, scoops, skirts, perhaps there's a point where that doesn't suit either, in terms of an object and as a supercar actually, and the glamour of that. You can add more to this package, but also keep the everyday usability side. So I think it's time for car number 2. So yeah, we're dealing with DB11 second. Send your hate mail to the usual address. First, we've got really usable rear seats back there. I appreciate on a road like this and in conditions like this, may not be your first concern, but they are usable for small people in the same way that the 911s are. And I know that's a big consideration for people who have a 911 Turbo. The second thing is you may be able to tell and hear that the Aston has in its favour is this engine, because it's just fantastic. It's lovely. Any concerns that you may have had about Aston downsizing from the old 5.9 6-litre are very, very swiftly allayed by this car. You've got to remember, it's not really that far downsized. It's a 5.2 still, so it's not gone down that much. So the turbos don't have a great deal to do, which means it still feels largely like a very, very well-endowed V12, shall we say. So you've got this glorious mid-range that you never ever used to have before. You really used to have to work the old cars out. What's immediately obvious though, driving these two cars on the same road, is that the Aston, very good though it is, it's not quite the sports car that the 911 is. What it counters with, I think, is nicer steering. There's a greater kind of sense of consistency to it and a nicer weighting, even though they're both electric. What you get as well in this is a really nice sense of balance. The weight, being contained between the axles and feeling that it's around you. It's not a light car, so it's quite a heavy car actually, in fact they're about 1800 kilos, but it always feels like it's on top of its mass really well, so you can begin to push it. It contributes as well to this impression that I get with the DB11 at least, of this really nice, dynamic, cohesive whole. One element stands out for me. It all just comes together to form this really nice sports GT package that you can drive long distance if you want to. You can drive more aggressively if you want to, you can just mooch around, you can do whatever. It's this all-encompassing thing that the dynamics let you do. We should deal with what the DB11 perhaps isn't quite as good at. First things first, it's a really big car actually. You probably got that impression from some of the exterior shots, but certainly in the context of the Porsche, it's just a larger car to manoeuvre around and to deal with. I have to say I'm not entirely sold on the looks just yet. It's not to say the 911 is some amazing beautiful supercar, because it's not, but I feel like the DB11 is very spec dependent. I like this colour, other people don't, and then there are colours that other people do like that I don't, so it would be worth being really, really sure. Whatever you do, don't get red dots on your leather. I don't know what that is, but don't do that. This central display is really nice to look at, but just the graphics aren't as crisp as perhaps they should be, and when you're looking at it all the time, probably going to be a little frustrating. So the gearbox, as we've mentioned in this car, is the 8-speed ZF that's used everywhere for good reason, because it's a great gearbox. It's not for flat out driving perhaps quite as good as that Porsche PDK, I hate to say it, just in terms of flat kind of full bore upshifts. It's a bit more exciting than Porsche. However, I'd argue it just suits the remit of the car a bit better. I think it does mooching and kind of cruising around a bit better than the PDK will. In terms of performance with these two, I'd say it's really close actually. Obviously the Aston has a bit more power and a better noise, a much better noise, but it is carrying a significant chunk more weight. Certainly this feels a big step on from the old V12s. That torque, as I mentioned, just a huge step up in performance. I don't know where they'll go with other models in this. The Porsche though, I think is actually a fraction quicker still. Obviously they claim those ludicrous 0 to 60 times as usual, but once you're up and running, just the way it builds on speed is phenomenal, and certainly you're not going to be wanting anywhere at any time for performance on these two. They are heroically quick cars. Now of course the flip side to the fact that the Aston isn't quite as brutal as the 911 when you're driving like your pants are on fire, is that when you do come down a bit, it's noticeably more relaxed and refined. It's really, really lovely actually when you're just sort of cruising along, and if we're doing the real world supercar GT thing, that has to be a consideration. Something else we should also mention today, given the idea is working our way up the sports car ladder, is that this is still a really cool brand, and it's a car people are so interested in at the moment. Every time we stop today, people want to ask questions about this and talk about this, and it's not the Porsche that they care much about. And actually, if we're saying that there's a point where red 911 turbos don't fit into your life anymore, I think a DB11, perhaps not in this colour, but I think a DB11 would fit into your life quite nicely actually.